So we are with Dr. Susie Nyman this afternoon. And Susie, over many, many years, has developed a lot of techniques and approaches and tools for helping children, particularly with dyslexia, but I would actually say there's so much of value regardless. She uses a multisensory approach, and just having watched her talk back from last year as well, I was just blown away by just how helpful everything she had to share was. So I actually think that any parent, I think particularly if you've got younger children and you're kind of starting out and you're not sure where to start, this is a good place to start. So I'm going to hand over to you, Susie.
Thank you very much, Julia, and thank you for inviting me to this Learn Free conference again this year. So it's nice to share those experiences. And I've only got one son, but he's dyslexic, and sort of as he grows up, actually helping him to understand his science, understand his English, and the journey we've been through, not only with him, but also with my own students who quite often have very low ability. And so you have to find many, many different ways in order to engage them and enable them to learn. So I hope this is useful for everybody. So today, I'm going to talk about dyslexia, a multisensory approach. And it was in 2017 when I visited Australia, talking at the Learning Difference Convention in Melbourne and Sydney, that Gillian Zoscher actually said, "You're helping dyslexic students from the inside out. I understand what it's like, and I just want to help them do really well." And at college, we have the highest value added in the whole college, our department. We do the best. So that's really good. And it's all about understanding the student, understanding how they learn, and individualizing and personalizing their learning so that they can actually achieve their best potential. It was Albert Einstein that said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited, and imagination encircles the world." And if you can get that student to imagine what it's like, what they're writing, for example, in creative writing, or imagine and visualizing what they can see with their maths, they're more likely to understand. So I'm Susie, I'm from the Sixth Form College, Farnborough. This is my 26th year at the college, and you can find me at Dr. Susie Nyman on Twitter. Today, I'm going to talk about dyslexia multisensory approach. I'm going to start off with the history of the PNEU, and that's where it links in with the Learn Free conference, because we followed Charlotte Mason's curriculum many, many years ago about observing and narrating. And with Linda Moobell, about 35 years ago, Pat Lindemoon and Nancy Bell joined together to create this special company in California, and there they look at visualizing and verbalizing, which is very similar to the Charlotte Mason curriculum. I've been teaching at Farnborough now, as I said, for 26 years, and I taught in curriculum support at the Oratory School as well, so I'll come across some examples from the boys from the Oratory. I'm going to say about what is multisensory teaching. Something they asked me for in Australia was Susie's signature lesson, so sort of a recipe of different things to do to help your students to understand, or your children to understand, and also ideas for other subjects, because fundamentally I am a scientist, I'm a chemist, so a lot of the stuff I talk about quite often is chemistry and biology. But having a son that had to do many, many different subjects, obviously I've helped him through a wide variety of subjects there, and also in curriculum support. So here's the history. Let's begin over 50 years ago. I went to the PNEU school, and there we followed Charlotte Mason's curriculum, and her student motto was, "I am, I can, I ought, I will." And those are inspirational quotes that you can even use today. It was a really interesting curriculum, looking at through nature, going on nature walks and things like that. And if you're interested, there is a podcast that I did with Leah Bowden that was such fun, on my wedding anniversary, no less. And we just couldn't stop laughing. So do pop on her podcast, because you might like to listen to it afterwards. So we did picture study. We used to look at old masters, and here's one, Leonardo da Vinci. The headmistress would ask us to observe the picture. She would tell us how large that was and provide context about the picture. And she would ask us to narrate about the picture too. So here's an example, Leonardo da Vinci, The Last Supper. And she would say to us, okay, look at that. This one's based on St. John's Gospel. And you can see here Jesus is in the centre, and also there's Judas in there in a shadow sort of on the left, and he's tipped over the salt. And you would look at the colours, what's in the foreground, what's in the background, what do you think's going on, and provide some context there. And it was really interesting. I never understood why Mrs. Jacobson made us do this, but now I do, because it's a fundamental, fantastic skill for understanding science and many, many different subjects. But Leonardo da Vinci was really interesting because he also did anatomical drawings and he made inventions. Here's some beautiful anatomical drawings here. He invented a ball bearing machine here. He's really good at drawing bones. You can see that on the right, and the sort of the prototype for the modern car. And he also invented a longbow. Now, coming back to Linda Mood Bell, more recently, I met them and I visited them in Notting Hill, and they spoke to me about visualising and verbalising. Visualising something and verbalising about that picture. And this is very similar, as I said before, to Charlotte Mason's curriculum. So when I visited Linda Mood Bell in London, Christina Petronis showed me this picture of a snail. And she said to me, what they do with the children is they look at the snail. They say, what is it? What do you think they're doing? What's the background? What do you think is going on with the grass? Is it moving? How big's the ant? How big's the snail? What colour is the snail's shell? What's the shape of the shell? What's the colour? And what sort of sound do you think the snail would make, etc.? So you're building that picture. So you're trying to get that child to visualise that picture, but also verbalise. And with reading, with children, young children, it's really good for them to visualise the story and make movies in their head so that they can understand that story and remember it. And with dyslexic children, sometimes they have difficulty making that movie in their head, understanding what they've read, and have to read it over and over again until they understand. And so it's really, really important for them to be able to extract that information, make that movie, and by doing that, they can remember it. So here we've got the Charlotte Mason curriculum. We've got observing and narrating, whereas with Linda Mood Bell, we've got visualising and verbalising. So very, very similar there. So here in my multisensory approach, I'm going to talk about a few fun ideas. First of all, I've had a few questions from parents asking about dyslexia. Where can I get information from? And if you type in Google Dyslexia Explained and Nessie PDF, you can access this book here, which explains it really, really easily. Also, where to get help. The British Dyslexia Association, based in Bracknell, they've got a main website. You can get information there. And they have asked me to make quite a few webinars over the last couple of years. So you'll see some of my webinars on there that are free. I've also done a BBC bite-size article, which the British Dyslexia Association asked me to write for the BBC. And also there is another article that came out last May in their Contact magazine. The Helen Archive Centre is based near us in Frensham. I now live in Farnborough, and that's in Frensham near Farnham. And they actually have some really good teachers there and a good setup for people if they need assessments for dyslexia. Here, we're going to look at the multisensory approach. I'm going to talk about onion teaching students in layers, guiding our students or children on the tightrope walk in education. What are the reasons why students are underachieving? Every child deserves the education that's right for them. A multisensory techniques in science, and then later on other subjects further down the line. The second section, I'm going to give you my signature lesson, and then ideas for other subjects such as English, French, geography, and history. So what is multisensory teaching? It is what it says on the tin. Teaching using the 5 senses, or 7 senses if you want to talk about proprioception and things. The way I teach my students and my son is like an onion, like Shrek, in layers. You have that core information that you're going to speak about with that student. You then build it up in layers. So for example, you might be talking about the heart. The first core information is, what are the key words? What is oxygenated, what's deoxygenated, and then giving hooks in the second layer about how to remember those key words. Walking through a heart, it could be you're clapping the key words to Michael Jackson's Beat It, many different ways that you can remember that information, because you just want to be able to recall it when you get into the exam. And we want to guide our students or children on their tightrope walk in education. And when my students turn up to my lessons, they turn up with a cup of coffee, a mobile phone, and it shows here a rucksack, but most of them have handbags, to be honest. And why are those students underachieving? And working in a private school, it could be that they're homesick. Obviously, home educated students aren't going to be homesick because they've been working at home. They might have low self-confidence, and I've heard a lot of this during the week, whereby people have sent their children to school and then taken them out because they find it hard to learn in big classes. Something's happened. They might have specific learning difficulties and are struggling, so the parents have got more time to help them themselves. They might be dyslexic, they might be dyspraxic, they might have ASD. But what I do notice is that the students that I come to see me, many are low ability, and they have this fixed mindset, whereby they say, I can't do it, I give up. And you've got to change that fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Yes, I can do it. I want to do it like my friend. I want to do better, and I will succeed. And sometimes at home, particularly in COVID, you might have seen toxic stress situations where the parent may have lost their job, or there may have been a bereavement in the family, and that causes a lot of stress for that child. And this word toxic stress, I first heard of from Professor Fischetti in Sydney when he spoke then at the Learning Differences Convention. He said every child deserves the education that's right for them. And that's so important. And I think particularly at this conference, that's what you as parents are doing. And that's what I did as a parent with my son all the way through education. I was always helping him in the evening, and every holiday we were doing Bond English exercise books. Every summer we used to do those because he just couldn't understand his English. And is every student accessing the curriculum in the best way? I always think this is like an ice cream van. When I was a young child, you go up to an ice cream van and Granddad would say, okay, girls and boys, what would you like to have? And I remember as a very young child, I couldn't read the labels, you know, when I was about 3 or 4. I couldn't read what the ice creams were or see what the ice creams were. So why not, you know, put the children on a box, enable them to be able to see what the ice creams are? Or even the man to come out and lean out and say, what would you like, and explain what they are. But the easiest thing is actually to go to that student and serve them with what they want. And it's the same in education. Instead of just standing up at the front of the classroom, go around to each individual child and say, what don't you understand? How can I help you? Can I give you another layer of the onion? And with your own children, you're going to know really well what they do and don't understand and how you can help them. So these are some boys I worked with at the oratory school. I will change their names. This was William, and he was very dyslexic, and I would speak to him, and the words I said to him, he couldn't understand. I think he had auditory processing difficulties. So when I spoke to him, he didn't understand what I say. So I had to explain it really, really slowly. This chap here, he was very, very quiet, and I had to use body language to see whether he understood it or not. But when he did, if you saw this massive smile, you knew that he got it. This chap here, I'll call him Robert for now, he was hearing impaired, so I had to enunciate the words very, very clearly so that he could understand what I was saying. And this chap here, he asked me to actually do the reproductive system one evening at school. I thought, oh my goodness, can't do that, boys' school. He says, the menstrual cycle, miss, I don't get it. So we drew this massive graph of all the hormones, and we followed it through with strawberry shoelaces and raspberry shoelaces. And in the end, he said, miss, I've got it. I said, how's that? He goes, I can see it up there. I can see it up there, miss. And he was visualizing it, and so he could understand what I was talking about. Here's another boy. He was fascinating. I took him for A-level biology and chemistry, and we used to use these massive mind maps, and he could only use particular colours. ATP always had to be in red, and other carbon compounds had to be in black. But the thing was, sometimes he couldn't say the word. And for example, hypoglycemic, and he would say it back to front, and so I would write it out in different colour post-it notes in different colours so you could see what the word meant, and then we will go and make a story about it. So I said to him one day, hey John, he said, yeah, do you understand what hypoglycemic means? He goes, oh, not really, miss. And I went, oh, okay. So John, when you're in the pub and you're drinking your beer, he goes, no, miss, I don't drink beer, I drink cider. So I said, so, John, when you're in the pub and you're drinking your cider and you have loads and loads to drink, your wee goes watery, and so you become hypoglycemic. Oh, I need a wee. He goes, oh, I've got it now, miss. Now, if you're in the desert and you're really thirsty, oh, I need to wee. It's hypoglycemic and it's really smelly. He goes, oh yeah, I get it now, miss. And we wrote these words out in different colours and on different post-it notes, and then he remembered it. So you can do that with your children, with new terminology, a new glossary of terms. What are those words? And break them down into different colours. Here's two girls here. The one on the left, I used to call her Spicy, actually. And she was really difficult. She was always thrown out at the start of the lesson with the other teacher. And she came in to me and I said to her, you know what, Spicy, why are you so difficult with the other teachers? And she came in, she went like this. I said, when you undo your arms, we'll then have a chat. So she sat there for 5 minutes. I went up and down the corridor, came back, and eventually she went like that. I said, come here, Spicy, come to my computer. And I put these different colour backgrounds on her. And I found out that her colour was green. And when she had green on the background, she could then actually focus on the words on the computer because they didn't move around. We found out that she was severely dyslexic, and so that really helped her. This is another student, I just call her Emma for now. And she would sit in the class. And what was really interesting was that she hid behind another student. And she quite often wasn't there. And so she was falling behind with her work, but it was her friend that used to help her decode what she had to do. And then one day her friend wasn't there, and I found out that actually she was severely dyslexic. And so I had to explain things in lots and lots of different ways. We had these little mini whiteboards by their desk, and you would put instructions down there so she could follow, breaking it down in sizable chunks. So here now, I'm going to give you some examples of science techniques for students, but you could do these for these techniques. You can use these for any subject, to be honest. We use puppets for diagnosis. We've got digestive system models. We've got the cell, the kidney, flowering plant and leaf, mitosis, neurons, and DNA. So we use puppets for diagnosing and treating different conditions. If you've got to find out what happens, how you diagnose someone with coronary heart disease, then a student can tell one another what it is using puppets, and they find it more easy to understand and remember. Here we've used Play-Doh for the digestive system, and then we use a big whiteboard, and then the students label it round with marker pens and things like that. The example on the right is from a girl called Charlotte, who actually taught at home. I didn't have Play-Doh at home at the time, so we used tin foil, and she modelled the digestive system out of tin foil. You could model the Battle of Hastings out of tin foil for all I don't mind. Use whatever you like. You could practice the Battle of Hastings with Lego people. Whatever works for your own child, and that is how Bambi Gardner started Ochre Books, was acting out the Battle of Hastings using Lego people with her daughter. So biology, this is an actual diagram. This is actual model. This diagram is actual model what the students made, and then the Ochre Books artist drew it. So you can make models of the cell, you can make models of anything, you know, models of dinosaurs, whatever your child likes to make it out of Play-Doh, because you can get smelly Play-Doh and it's really fun to use. Here I made a jigsaw for the kidney. I actually made it out of pottery. And so the students can pull these different parts out and feel what they're like. But you can make this out of funky foam. You can make it out of Play-Doh, sourdough, anything. It doesn't have to be expensive. Here's a flowering plant. One of the first boys I worked with at the oratory, he goes, "Miss, I don't understand the flower." So we made this giant mat of a flower, the size of a tablecloth, and we painted it with acrylic paints, and I color coded the different parts of the flower on different cards. And so the female parts were pink and the male parts were blue and the other bits were green. But Harry came up to me and goes, "Miss, I can't remember it." So I said, let's do the female parts. Stigma, style, ovary and carpel. I said, "Do you know anyone starting with S?" And he went, "Yeah, my mother's called Sophie." I said, "If you do, Sophie sits on the chair, you'll remember it better." And so he did. And so he could remember that stigma, style, ovary and carpel. It has to be relatable, and it has to relate to something that child knows. It's no use relating it to a boxing match if they're not interested in boxing, for example. But with boys, it was great because you could relate lots of things to rugby. So William comes up and goes, "Miss, I don't understand the leaf." So we made it out of funky foam. We also made it out of biscuits. And I said to him at the end, it was just going into break time. I said, "You can take the biscuits away and eat them at break, William." He goes, "Oh, great, miss." And I gave him the biscuits and I got him to follow it down, all the different layers so that he could understand it. And last summer, I actually did it with leaves. So you could do it with leaves. You know, I did that in the park and took a photo. You could do it with your children when you go out for a walk. You could make anything out of leaves. It doesn't have to be the leaf. It could be, you know, a picture of, I'm trying to think, do the digestive system if you wanted. It could be anything. So here, this is a really interesting one because they don't understand mitosis. Mitosis, cell division, interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. I said, "Okay, boys, let's use the pipe cleaners." And they said, "Do you know what, miss, we did that downstairs with the biology teachers." And I went, "Oh, that's good. It's rubbed off then." So I said, "Let's try balloons." So we tried balloons. We did balloons. And one of the Chinese boys says, "Oh, I haven't quite got it, miss. I haven't quite got it." And they were both wearing Manchester United football kit. And I related it to a game of football, and then they remembered it. Interphase, the team is in the changing room. Prophase, so that DNA is unwound. Prophase, those chromosomes become visible. Prophase would be those footballers coming out of the changing room onto the pitch. Metaphase, the chromosomes lying on the equator. Metaphase, the start of the game. Anaphase, the chromosomes split and move to opposite poles of the cell. So that will be anaphase, them going to the opposite goals. And telophase, 2 new daughter cells are formed, 2 new teams are formed. They then got it. They then understood it. And I'd done those 3 stages, and eventually with the football game, they actually got it. It was brilliant. Neurons, Harry said to me, Miss, don't get neurons. So we actually got pipe cleaners and bits of beads and things like that, and made the sensory relay and motor neurons. And he then got it. He really enjoyed that. People don't understand how DNA replicates. And so I do know that John Lewis sell these open-ended zips, and you can zip them one against the other. I don't know any other shop that has them, to be honest. I originally bought them many years ago in Farnborough in a little fabric shop, and they sold them. So they're really good because you start with 2 red ones and then put in a second blue one to show DNA replication. So, as I said before, when I was invited to speak to in Australia, they asked me to do a signature lesson. So here it is. Diagram, music and keywords, walk in heart, model heart out of Play-Doh, blood flow sequencing, label vessel models on a whiteboard, the circulatory song, laminated exam question to play the weakest link. So first of all, I would get a heart diagram. I'd see what they knew already. It's called harvesting the information. So number 2 would be the vena cava. This would be the right atrium. You try before you buy. So that's the tricuspid valve, the right atrium, sorry, right ventricle going up to the pulmonary artery, which is T-shaped. Goes up to the lungs, oxygenates the pulmonary veins, into the left atrium. Atrium is the biggest room in the Roman house. There's a nice fun fact for you. In Sainsbury's, you try before you buy. So that's the bicuspid valve. Down at the bottom is the left ventricle, and then you go up into the biggest artery in the body, the aorta. So with any luck, some of the students might remember some of the stuff if they're awake and they've had breakfast. So what we would do, we would clap the keywords to Michael Jackson's Beat It. Vena cava. Right atrium. So you can find some music, and then you can attach some words to that music, and the students or children will remember it. And when we were allowed to walk through the examination, years ago when I was doing this singing and clapping, you would see them tapping their leg to Michael Jackson on the left and writing the answers down on the right to the diagram. They could actually recall what they were doing in the lesson. Walking through the heart, this is Jenny. She wanted to be famous, so she asked to be in the picture. So you can see her walking through the heart there, and then she would put cards down saying what the different parts were. You could make this yourself out of old wallpaper, to be honest, or just go to B&Q and rip off a strip and as a sample and make your own. Here I actually made a model of the heart out of pottery, so you can actually feel it. So you could make it out of sourdough, Play-Doh, plasticine, and then we would sequence the key words. And here you can see I've color coded them. And they love using Post-it notes. They find it really hard, but if you can actually write all the words on the Post-it notes and get the students to physically move them around, they're more likely to be able to remember it. Why not eat your way through the heart and actually sequence it through with blue and red M&Ms? I've done that a few times. Rather tasty way to do it. You can do the circulatory song, and one girl went up from 24% to 52% by remembering all the songs she had learnt on YouTube. My son never read any books for English. He just watched all the videos, and he got an A star. So there's something in that, ladies. So here's a laminated exam question. So get an exam question, blow it up to A3, laminate it, and then you can write on that laminated question the answers. And finally, we will play the weakest link. And I'd say, what is the biggest artery coming out of the heart? And then they write down aorta. You can see some of them are hiding. because they don't want to be seen on the picture. These are actually my students, and the artist has redrawn them. And the beauty of using the mini whiteboards is that they write it down, the answer, and they could have the wrong spelling, so it's a chance for them to practice it. Practice the spelling and practicing those keywords and answers. So here's some examples here for chemistry. I made tiles out of pottery. My sister used to phone up during my pottery lesson and say, Susie, I don't want any more of your etchings, thank you very much. I'm sitting at the table in the room, in the pottery room, and she's sitting there, loudspeaker, the whole room can hear it. It's so embarrassing. So I just made props for my students, okay? So they can sequence the first 20 elements: lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, neon. They can see patterns. You can make these out of laminated cards. You can make them out of post-it notes. You can then do electronic configurations one after the other. You might like to use paper chains. Methane, ethane, propane, butane, pentane, hexane, etc. And they sequence that together. You could sequence that as a story. You can have little snippets of bits of a story and then sequence the story together. It could be history. You could be sequencing the Battle of Hastings, for example, or World War II. Chemistry, and this was Harry again. We were talking about cations and anions. He says, I don't get it, miss, I can't remember it. And I said, what does cation sound like? And he said, cat on ironing board, and it's happy, therefore it's positive. So positive ion is the cation. That's how Harry remembers it. And negative ion is, the artist has changed the picture, but it's actually Anna chopping onions, because Anna is really scary. And if you had Anna chopping onions, you'd be crying too, to be honest. She's one of my frightening ladies in my team, a brilliant teacher. But there you've got chopping onions is negative, a negative experience, therefore anions are negative. And it was Sam that loved giant banqueting paper. We get it from Costco, the size of a tablecloth. And we put the topic in the middle, whatever that was. I think it was alcohols I was doing with him at the time. And we put key definitions there, and they would put a summary or keywords or key questions or anything. And he really enjoyed that, and he could color code it to however he wanted. I'm going to call him Simon for now. His name's not Simon, but I have to change the names of the students. So he came up to me and says, I don't understand the physics symbols, miss. So I got these different coloured cards, and I used the words and the symbols on the other side, and then he would match them up. I just put the cards all over the table, and then he would match them up. It took about 3 attempts before he could remember them, and the next lesson we'd try them again. So here you could use words and pictures for anything, particularly with language like French or German or Spanish. You could put the keyword there and a picture to link with it. Students find the physics equations and science, maths and things like that difficult, and they use this science equation, this science triangle, sorry. Moles is mass over relative atomic mass, or relative formula mass. Density is mass over volume, speed is distance over time. So you can make a triangle, put post-its in, and then the student can see how to rearrange that equation. Now I've got here other subjects. English. This is called dominoes for Inspector Calls. So you have the answer here, and you have some sort of fact here about them, and you link them all together and go round until you've got all the answers. The students quite like that. Our German teacher has used that for German vocabulary. French, you could use it for French, but anything, or even maths. I used this for times tables. Once times 2 is 2. It was really useful. And a boy went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class when I taught him at home maths. And the last time I saw him, he said, Susie, I've got a badge, best in maths in the class. He was so happy, so delighted. Okay, other English ideas. Random sweets. For those with young children, this is really, really good. So my brother set me Annika's challenge. He said, Susie, my son and daughter can't write essays. And I said, okay. I gave them a packet of random sweets in the back of the car. I had between Staines and East Grinstead to teach them how to write essays. So I made them a connective keyring, and I said, one misty morning, and then I said, choose a random, so they could eat it, and then they had to put that sweet in the story, and then I would choose another connective, unfortunately, and then they pick another sweet, and they had to put that into the story as well. By the time we reached East Grinstead to my brother-in-law's 60th birthday, they could write stories and they knew how to do it. Very, very easy technique. And French. You can do mind mapping. It's really good to put pictures in as well, because the left side of the brain is logic, therefore it's words, and the right hand side of the brain is creative, there it's pictures. So you're using both sides of the brain. So you might like to set up these dominoes and have the word one side and a picture the other. And I did this for my son's French vocabulary, and I bought some magnetic paper. You normally find it in Aldi between the cabbages and the chainsaws, to be honest. You have to keep looking, but it's one of those things, you know, it appears one day and it's gone the next. But if you can get some magnetic paper, you can write anything on it, you can put it through the printer, and then you can put those words on the fridge, and then they can learn those words. As children are very young, I remember making words and sticking them all over the house, like fridge and door and window. And so as my son walked around the house, he could see what those words look like. Geography, really nice. We made this out of pottery. And you can actually get it to erupt by using sodium bicarbonate and tomato sauce. The children love it. I like doing it in a wine glass, and you do sodium bicarbonate and vinegar. But if you add fairy liquid, it all bubbles over. They think it's amazing. So do try that as well. Now, this is an idea for history that can be used for anything. This came from our head of history, Gavin Sheffield. He suggested colour coding the questions and the answers. So the key word would go on a pink, blue or pink revision card, and then the main answers to that question might be yellow or green or whatever. But traffic lighting those questions and answers, I think, was a really good idea. But most of all, and most importantly, with any child, is to tell them, if you believe, you can achieve. Over the door in my classroom, it says, if you believe, you can achieve. And it's so important for that student to have a positive mindset and to believe in themselves. And you at home, you can keep encouraging them every day. So a summary of what I've said today. The history, I went to the PNEU school, we followed the Charlotte Mason's curriculum. And when I spoke to Leah last year, I suddenly realised I've been using Charlotte Mason's curriculum all my life, to be honest. What is multisensory teaching? It is what it says on the tin, teaching using the 5 senses. I've given you examples of multisensory science. To use food, you might bake a cake, and then as you go through those ingredients baking the cake, for example, the flour is a carbohydrate, the butter is a fat, the eggs are protein. You can then attach questions to those ingredients. Then once you've baked that cake and it comes out, you can then retest. What is it we're eating? What's the carbohydrate? What's the fat? What's the protein? I've spoken about various different multisensory science techniques. I've given you my signature lesson there for the heart, whereby we're clapping the keywords to Michael Jackson's Beat It. We might be walking through the heart, making out of Play-Doh and playing the weakest link. And I've given you ideas for other subjects you might be interested in, but every idea you could use for any subject. And I think that's where people have difficulty sometimes transferring those ideas to different subjects. So for revision, use those multisensory techniques, use puppets, use teddy bears, use Lego, you know, Lego mobile, people, whatever you want to use. Make diagrams, walk in them, use your 5 senses, make connectives, key rings, because, you know, when my son couldn't write essays, he kept writing and then, and then, and then, and the teacher was going, he just can't write essays. And I went, well, we'll give it a go. And I made these connective key ring, and he just went off, and he just suddenly got it. It was absolutely brilliant. Now, everything I've said today comes from mainly my multisensory teaching toolkit, and it's published by Oka Books. Bambi got hold of me from Oka Books and said, Susie, would you like to write a book? And I said, yeah, if you like. So literally one Sunday, I uploaded all the photos off my iPad, and I wrote the book in an afternoon, to be honest. So you can imagine it's not very thick, but it's got all the ideas I've used, and every single technique in there tells a story. Hang on. There it is. Okay. It's not very thick.
Susie, I can add there that Oka Books have an exhibitors page at the conference, right?
That's right, yeah. So
And,
you can see in there, look, there's the DNA zips. We also did electron shells. I think that's the, yeah, there's the leaf that I did with William. Bambi then said to me, Susie, will you write that grade riser book? And I said, oh, I don't know. And she said, well, in lockdown, there's not much to do, is there? And I went, well, I suppose not. So at Easter last year, I wrote this grade riser book here. What I see is that becoming a grade riser, riding through those grades and passing your exams, it's like a crock and bush. There's so many different skills and techniques that you need to pass an exam. And so I phoned her up and I said, no, Bambi, it's like a crock and bush. And she went, yeah, Susie. She said, can you sketch it out for me? So I did. I sketched out this crock and bush, and then the artist drew it up for me. And it's always better than I ever did. So at the top here, we've got the command verb, the most important thing in exams, and the examiner's tools: identify, name, list, describe, and explain. You need to know the marks and the points here. Sorry, marks and points. The levels of response, levels 1, 2, and 3. 1 is basic, 2 is sound, 3 is in depth. How you're going to answer those essays: point, example, explanation, link. And then all these different things in the middle about how you remember that information. Are you going to remember it as a storyboard? Are you going to do it as a brainstorm, a song, dominoes, a model? How are you going to do it? And then finally, at the bottom level are the exam questions your students, your children are going to have to come across. And it could be short answers, tick in the box, fill in the gaps, multiple choice. There's so many different ways that exam board is going to ask those questions. And in order to answer those questions, I created this exam task board, and it actually breaks down how to answer exam questions. And there is a discount code of 15%, I think, at the conference. Bambi might have done another one, but she always says, just put Dr. Susie 15%, that'd be fine.
There's another, yes, there is another deal on the Oka page. There's a giveaway.
Oh, yes,
as well.
Wages are Bambi.
Yeah, so go and have a look. I actually want to encourage you, go and look at all the exhibitors. Quite a few of them have got some very good deals.
Yeah.
And go and grab them, because I think I heard about one where only 4 people have put their names down. So you might be without, those are good odds.
Yeah,
go and enter all of these things. Yeah.
Definitely in with a chance. So for the videos, the British Dyslexia Association came and visited my classroom. I think it was September 2017. Yes, it was, just after I've been to Australia. And we've made this YouTube video, and actually they use this for training all around the country when they're training for their special needs qualifications. So you can have a look at that. That's free. Oka Books have done loads of videos on me. We spent a day in my classroom filming. That was fun too. And finally, look, thank you very much for taking the time to listen, because I know you've all got lots of children that you need to be looking after. So thanks for taking the time for listening today. Has anybody got any questions?
I did open the chat if there's anyone. And I know, Maria, are you still holding a baby or trying to type one-handed or something it looks like?
And I've just
Yeah.
managed to put her down.
Well done.
Yeah. In addition to Oka Books having an exhibitors page, Susie also has an exhibitors page with her books specifically, I think.
Yes.
Did we do that? Let me just
Yes,
check.
we did. I just put my House Become Grade Riser Multisensory, and we've just finished. I don't know if she's released it yet. I've done a cell biology book because Bambi's asked me to write the biology GCSE books. And what's really nice about working with Oka is that I have a vision of something that I want to do, and I sketch it out, and it's not the best in the world. But then Bryony, the artist, takes it away and makes these beautiful images. And in the cell book, the actual animal cell and the plant cell I drew myself, and then she made it all posh as she does. Yeah. So that's really nice.
I'm trying to make sure we can all see you better now. So I took your screen
Oh,
share away just so we can at least see who's been talking all this time. But I just find, I think your approach, the thing is, I think all children require multisensory. Our children are not all little clones that all learn the same way. And, I found like one child literally, did use Lego to learn and develop, and then another one would just read books and love to read, and it's our job as parents to kind of identify what turns the light on for that child, what helps them make connections. But I do think, Susie, you have missed your calling. I do think you should have been an actor at some point with this. Oh, I don't know that, miss. I was enjoying your accents. We think, I think the others might agree with me that you should maybe have had a little sideline as an actor.
I don't know. I think the truth is, Juliet, many years ago when I finished my PhD, my PhD was on insect pheromones, and the talk for the evening at the conference when we were in Wales many years ago was sex flies and videotape. And I had a death slot after dinner. And I stood up and I had fly catchers and I had giant flies, jelly ones, throwing them in the audience. And I had a moth that I'd caught the night before and put in a jam jar and all this sort of thing. And there was this chap called Professor Dick Stoodley, and he was on after me. And he said, Susie, I can't follow that. He said, you've got a gift, use it. But it took me a long time to realise what it was, and people like that. They like the stories, don't they? They like the stories about the children. They like to be able to relate it to something. And in some ways, those stories then relate to your own children. And then you can see how to do it with your own children. Even ourselves. Yeah.
So I think there's so much value in what you've shared today. So Natalia says she's impressed by your creativity. It's incredible having all these ideas how to put science into pictures and diagrams and even Play-Doh.
Thank you, Natalia. I think you've been writing to me this week, haven't you? Thank you. Yeah.
Anyone else want to comment or ask? You can also unmute and speak if you want.
They've all gone quiet.
Then Natalia's leaning over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really impressed, and I feel like, I'm not so creative. I don't know. I feel like I need a lot of learning myself, but I'm really, I'm just so encouraged and blown away. There is a way. There is a way I can help my daughter, and we can make it fun. We can make it enjoyable, and hopefully that will spark something. And thank you so much.
I think the secret is to make it fun, make it enjoyable. But as my mate Action Jackson says, own it, Susie, own it. You go in the class, and we're going to do the digestive system, 11 meters mouth to anus. I get the balloons out. I'm not joking. I've got them out on Wednesday. And you get the balloons out and you model that digestive system, and they're just going mad. because they love it, and you're ripping them off the ceilings because they really enjoy it. And when I do the reproductive system with a female reproductive system, it's really embarrassing, to be honest. I went to a convent school and I had to teach contraception, and I'm like, oh my goodness, when I first started teaching, I didn't know what to do. But it gets easier, you know, after 26 years, it does get a bit easier. And so I get the balloons out and I say, okay, let's do the female reproductive system. You just stand there with balloons like this, like a tree. And then I twist them all and I make them into, you know, some sort of, you know, organ or whatever. And they understand it and they remember it, but they remember it because they had fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And it made them laugh. And you know, 25 years later, we moved to Oxfordshire for 18 years. 25 years later, I'm sitting in the changing room in the swimming pool, putting your socks on, and this girl goes, "You taught me, Susie. You taught me, you know, 20 years ago." I said, "Did I?" I said, "Yes. I remember you. I remember you getting the balloons out. I remember this, that, and the other, you know." And they remember you because they had fun.
Well, we did a great activity, I think, which was also to do with the sort of waste system. Is that the endocrine system?
The waste digestive system, endocrine hormones.
Yeah. Well, there was an activity we did in our group where we put down a sheet of plastic and we had some like bits of wads of toilet paper and that kind of thing. And the children, we had other children with spray bottles and some children with brooms. So the children had to wet it all, and we kind of moved it along. You know, it was kind of to do with how the body gets rid of waste kind of thing. I seem to remember a little while ago. It was good fun. And another curriculum that we used for a while, which was called KONOS, they did a thing where when the children were learning about the ear, they created a model of the ear that you could literally walk through. So you built like a kind of a you know, like a den that you would build. So you would enter this tunnel, and then you had all these, and you could recreate a model of the ear. And they're very creative. And I think, you know, you will find, Natalia, the more you get into this with your children and you actually almost connect with your inner child, that creativity will come to you.
If you, the multi-sensory teaching toolkit book, it'll be about £3.25 or something. You can't print it for what it costs.
Yeah, she's growing her list, Natalia. She's growing her list.
But what I was going to say is, you know, you were saying that giant thing. I went down to Pangbourne and we're walking by the river, and my son didn't understand his Latin at all. And I was walking in the trees and I said, "Benjamin, here's the Roman house. This is the atrium. This is the cubiculum. This is the hortus, the garden. Can't you see it?" And he goes, "Mum, you've gone nuts." And I walked him through this gathering of trees, and I went through all the different parts of the Roman house. And his Latin teacher came up to me, you know, that week, and she said, "He got 10 out of 10 for his spellings. What did you do?" And I went, "Well, I went down the Roman house down by the river." I said, "It's great. Take the children down there. They'll remember it." We walked through all the different rooms, and it really helped. I mean, you could draw it out on a giant piece of wallpaper on the floor and walk through it if you liked. But this was great because it was all divided up in the trees and it worked a treat.
Yeah, experience is always good for learning.
Yeah, I think so. And walk into charity shops and you see things, you know, like Lego, Duplo. You can put words on the Mega Blocks. You could put the words on stickers on the Mega Blocks in different colours. Use what you've got already.
Yeah,
you don't have to have anything fancy.
Yep. Well, I'm going to end it there just because we're really just about on our hour now. So thank you so much, Susie, as usual. It does not disappoint. And let's give you a round of applause there.
Thank you.
And thank you, Juliet, for inviting me.